Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to dig into a story with, just about everything you could ask for. We got international business dealings, political maneuvering, and a company, for better or for worse, that really embodies, the American dream.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We're diving into Nippon Steel's bid to take over U.S. Steel, and trust me, we're going to unpack it all.
So the foundation of this deep dive is a Wikipedia article. It covers the whole proposed acquisition, which, helps us set the stage, get a feel for the timeline and the main players. But this thing goes way deeper than a simple business deal, right? I mean, we're
Right.
talking about a company that was once a giant in American industry might end up, with foreign owners. So that begs the question, what happens to the workers, the industry, even the country?
Yeah, it's a question with a whole lot of different answers, and that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Absolutely. So picture this for a second. It's 1901, a brand new century is kicking off, and U.S. Steel is making history as the world's very first billion-dollar company. They're building those iconic skyscrapers, the ones that basically define the American landscape. But fast forward to today, and U.S. Steel is looking at a very different reality.
Yeah, it really mirrors the decline of the whole American steel industry since, I'd say, the 1970s. U.S. Steel went from being at the top, the global leader, to a company that's, grappling with challenges,
Yeah.
struggling to keep up in a market that's constantly evolving. To give you an idea, when this acquisition bid came around, they had fallen to 27th globally
Wow.
in steel production, the smallest of the big three American steel producers.
A long way from their glory days. So how did U.S. Steel go from being top dog to ending up at the center of a corporate bidding war?
Well, it's complicated, but the American steel industry has been under pressure for decades, really. You've got global competition, changing economic policies, and the decline of those traditional manufacturing sectors all playing a part. U.S. Steel, even with its history, wasn't immune to these forces.
So come 2023, they're suddenly the target of not one, but multiple acquisition bids. It's a corporate drama unfolding in real time.
It was a wild ride, for sure.
So you've got these major players like Cleveland-Cliffs, already a powerhouse in American steel. They come onto the scene with a bang. They even managed to secure that endorsement from the United Steelworkers Union, which in this situation is a huge deal. Why was that so important?
Well, the union support can make or break a deal like this. The United Steelworkers, they represent thousands of workers in the industry, and their support was a signal. To some, at least. It said that Cleveland-Cliffs would be a responsible steward, especially when it came to jobs and worker rights.
I can see that. But then, just as things were getting interesting, the plot thickens. Automakers, big names like General Motors and Toyota, they start voicing concerns about Cleveland-Cliffs potentially having too much control if they were to acquire U.S. Steel.
Right, because steel is such a critical component in making cars.
Right.
That fear was if one company controlled too much of the steel supply, they could control prices, disrupt that balance in the auto industry.
It's amazing how these things have these ripple effects outward. But wait, there's more. We also had bids from Nucor, and they had that, a little bit of an air of mystery around them, especially after that whole corporate jet sighting.
Ah, yes. The
This
Nucor.
really fueled speculation about their true intentions.
Always interesting when a tiny detail becomes a big source of intrigue in these high-stakes deals.
Exactly. And on top of that, you've got ArcelorMittal, Stelco, and even that last-minute entry, this private company called Esmark. Talk about a crowded field. It seems like with all these bidders circling, U.S. Steel was suddenly holding all the cards.
In a way, yeah, they did. They had options, each with their own pros and cons. But then, just as the competition was heating up, a new player emerges from across the Pacific, Nippon Steel, a global giant with a proposition that U.S. Steel, they found it hard to ignore.
And we're back, diving right back into this whole Nippon Steel bid for U.S. Steel. It's a story that has really captured the business world, sparked debates that go way beyond Wall Street, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're not talking about just a simple acquisition here. This thing has political, economic, even national security implications.
Definitely not simple.
And when you look at the arguments for and against, you see, even the experts can't agree.
Not at all. You've got organizations like the Heritage Foundation. They're a pretty well-known conservative think tank, and they're taking a surprisingly pro-acquisition stance. What's their thinking there?
Yeah, it might seem kind of counterintuitive, but their argument comes down to this. They believe that if you block this deal, it would actually hurt the American economy more than it would help.
Interesting.
They say U.S. Steel needs this. this influx of resources, and that foreign investment, especially from an ally like Japan, shouldn't be discouraged.
So it'd be a whole different ballgame if this bid was coming from a country that wasn't, well, on such good terms with the U.S.
Exactly. The Heritage Foundation is really playing up that long-standing relationship between the U.S. and Japan, suggesting that this could be a win-win.
Got you.
They're saying that capital from Nippon Steel, it could revitalize U.S. steel, boost job creation, and make them more competitive globally.
So it's that whole rising tide lifts all boats kind of approach.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
of course, not everyone's buying it, right?
Right. You've got groups like the Hudson Institute, another think tank, but they focus on national security, and they are not happy about this. They're worried about the risks of a foreign company, even a friendly one, taking control of something as important as steel.
What are some of the specific concerns they've raised?
Well, one of the big ones is technology transfer. U.S. Steel, they have valuable knowledge, technology, and there's concern that it could, accidentally or not, find its way to Nippon Steel.
Right.
And that could hurt America's competitive edge, especially in areas tied to national security.
It's a good reminder that steel isn't just, any old commodity. It's crucial. Infrastructure, defense, so many industries that are vital to national security.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. If you rely too much on foreign entities for something that important, it could put the U.S. in a vulnerable position, especially when things are uncertain globally.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's like walking a tightrope. You want to encourage economic growth through foreign investment, but you also have to protect national interests. No easy answers there. But in the middle of all this geopolitical strategizing, we can't forget about the workers. They're the ones on the front lines. And from what I'm hearing, the unions, they aren't exactly thrilled about this deal either.
Not exactly. The United Steelworkers Union, they've got a lot of power in the industry. Remember, at first, they were all for Cleveland Cliffs. They saw them as the best bet to protect jobs, keep the current contracts in place. But when Nippon Steel entered the picture, well, things got complicated.
Even though Nippon Steel promised to honor those existing contracts, right? So what's the problem?
I think it's uncertainty and maybe a little bit of mistrust. Sure, Nippon Steel made promises, but the union's worried about what happens later, when those contracts expire and it's time to renegotiate.
Oh.
They've seen it before, promises made and broken when profits are on the line.
So it's about more than just what's written in the contract. It's about, well, the intention behind it, a real commitment to American workers long term.
Right. The union doesn't just want a promise on paper. They want a seat at the table, a voice, to be sure that their members are taken care of, not just now, but down the road.
That makes sense. I mean, they represent thousands of workers whose livelihoods are directly tied to what happens to U.S. Steel.
And you have to remember, their concerns, they're amplified by this sense of history repeating itself. They've seen other American companies, big ones, get acquired, promises made, and then factories close, jobs move overseas.
Yeah, it's like that underlying fear of globalization and how it impacts American workers, a fear that the steel is just another example of history repeating itself.
Exactly. This deal has become a symbol for all those anxieties about the changing nature of work, about globalization, about America's place in a world that's becoming more interconnected, more competitive.
So you're saying this one deal, it's like a tiny representation of these massive forces shaping the world today.
You could say that. And that's why, no matter how it ends, this story is far from over. The impact of this will be felt for years.
So where do things stand? It's October 9th, 2024. The deal is still up in the air. What are the most likely scenarios we're looking at?
Well, we've talked about the main ones: full approval, outright rejection, or that middle ground, the conditional approval. But honestly, looking at how Nippon Steel's acting, the whole political landscape, I'd say it's going to be an uphill battle.
The Biden administration is not on board. And then you got those investigations by CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, and the Department of Justice. Those are serious obstacles.
No doubt. CFIUS especially. They have the power to stop this deal dead in its tracks if they think it's a national security risk.
So even if Nippon Steel throws everything they've got at it, they're still facing some major roadblocks.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget the pressure coming from lawmakers, both Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, it's not every day you see that kind of agreement, especially on a complex issue like this.
True, very true. But it shows you just how politically charged this deal has become. It's about more than just money. It's about national pride, job security. It's about protecting American interests in a globalized world.
So what's Nippon Steel's next move? Are they ready to walk away, or are they doubling down?
Well, giving up now, that would be a huge blow financially, and it would damage their reputation.
Yeah.
I think they're going to keep trying to find ways to make this deal more appealing to the people who are hesitant.
Like sweetening the deal even more, what could they offer?
We've already heard them mention moving their U.S. headquarters to Pittsburgh, which is more symbolic than anything, but it's strategic. It shows commitment to the U.S. market. But they might have to offer more concrete guarantees.
Okay, like what?
Stronger commitments to creating jobs, more investment in U.S.-based research and development, maybe even agreeing to limits on their control over U.S. steel to ease those national security concerns.
So it's this balancing act, trying to save the deal without giving up too much control, without jeopardizing their own interests. High-stakes negotiations on a global scale.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how far they'll bend, how much they're willing to give up to make this acquisition happen.
Definitely something to watch. We're back, and for this final stretch, we're zeroing in on, well, maybe one of the biggest business stories of the year, this potential mega merger, Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel.
It's a story, and we've seen this firsthand, that goes way beyond just the bottom line, right?
Right.
You've got national security on the line, you've got the whole global trade landscape shifting, and the future of American industry hanging in the balance. No doubt about it. And as we stand here, October 9th, 2024, this deal is still waiting for the green light from regulators. Nippon Steel, they've tapped the brakes on their timeline. They know this isn't straightforward, but they're not backing down. Not yet, anyway. They're going all in on this. Lobbyists, working overtime, promises of new jobs, even that idea of picking up their U.S. headquarters and moving it to Pittsburgh. It's a calculated move, right? Show they're committed, maybe even soften the stance of those who aren't so keen on a foreign company swallowing up a piece of American history.
It's almost like they're running a whole political campaign, but instead of votes, they need those regulatory approvals.
That's a great way to put it. And just like in those campaigns, the next few weeks, the next few months, those are make or break for Nippon Steel.
Yeah.
They need to keep this momentum up, keep making their case, hope they can convince enough decision makers to get this thing over the finish line.
Because if this deal goes belly up, that's not just a loss for Nippon Steel. It sends a message to the world, right? About whether the U.S. is open to foreign investment, especially in key industries.
Exactly. It could be seen as, well, maybe a sign of protectionism on the rise, a hesitation to let go of industries considered vital, even if it means saying no to a close ally like Japan.
And that, like we talked about, has its own set of arguments on both sides. Some people, they'll tell you it's critical to protect American jobs, national security, but others worry about what happens if you close the door on foreign investment, stifle innovation, economic growth, all that.
It's a debate that's not going away anytime soon. There are good points on both sides.
For sure. But while we wait to see what the regulators do, there's another big question. What happens to U.S. Steel if this falls apart? Do they go it alone, try to find a new path, or do they end up the target of another acquisition? Maybe a different company takes a swing.
It's definitely possible. You can't deny U.S. Steel has a legacy, a name that means something, assets too. But they're also operating in a tough global market, facing those same headwinds that made them vulnerable in the first place.
It really makes you wonder, what does it even mean anymore in this day and age to be an American company when you've got these globalized markets economies all intertwined?
The million-dollar question, right? And it's one we're going to be wrestling with for years to come, I think, as the lines between national identity and global business, well, they just keep getting blurrier.
Couldn't agree more. So we're stepping away from the story for now, but there are still so many unanswered questions. Will Nippon Steel get what they want? What's next for U.S. Steel if they don't? It's a story that really captures how complex our world has become. Business decisions, they're never just about business anymore. And the impact of a single deal, well, it can be felt everywhere. It just goes to show staying informed, really thinking critically about these issues, looking at them from all sides, that's more important than ever. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.